traveling down life's highway, full of goodness and grace. I wake up every morning with a smile upon my face, 'cause I know everything I need to know. But I know there's still more to know. So I don't say no, let spirit flow and let it continue to grow. And know that I feel alright when I'm flowing with the river of life. I feel alright, 'cause I'm one with the love and light. I feel alright.
Good morning and welcome to Center for Spiritual Living Rogue Valley Sunday Service. I'm Reverend Kimberly Hawkins. We are a radically inclusive, loving community dedicated to teaching spiritual tools to help transform personal lives and help make a world that works for everybody. And we welcome you no matter where you may be on your own personal spiritual journey this morning or this week if you're watching the recording. We're going to open this morning with a song by our musicians, Anton Miserak and Laura Berryhill.
And this is a song by Jan Garrett, J.D. Martin, and Esther Nicholson.
I hear the music down in my soul. I hear the music down in my soul. I hear the music down in my soul. And the whole wide world is my home. I got a new day down in my soul. I got a new day down in my soul. I got a new day down in my soul. And the whole wide world is my home. I love the silence down in my soul. I love the silence down in my soul. I love the silence down in my soul. And the whole wide world is my home. I feel the power down in my soul. I feel the power down in my soul. I feel the power down in my soul. And the whole wide world is my home. And the whole wide world is my home. And the whole wide world is my home.
The whole wide world is my home. Let's go into an opening prayer. So just taking a deep breath, and wherever you may be, let's just feel into the presence, the power, the life that God, Spirit, Atman, whatever we call it, universal intelligence, infinite love, absolute peace, that source from which all life springs, that source that is our soul, that is our very life. I know it is exquisite order. If we imagine the order of amazing human bodies, that all systems operate without our conscious thought. If we imagine the constellations, the galaxies, the solar systems, set in their orbits by that divine source of all life. So good to just take time to recognize it as all there is, everywhere present, always, all-knowing and all-powerful. I know that I am one with that life and that is the truth for each one listening to this broadcast. It is the truth for each one on the planet, all sentient beings. We are the power, the love, the order, the beauty, the peace, and so much more. As Rumi put it, we are the ocean that is God in a drop, a precious, unique slice of that one. And so as we come together this morning, I trust and know that through the message, the music, through the power of that one mind, that we are all uplifted, that we are all reminded a bit of whatever it is we need to remember and recognize about our divinity, our life on the planet, and our eternal lives. So blessing each one within the earshot of this service, blessing each soul across the planet in these challenging times, knowing there is order, there is love, there is goodness, for God is present everywhere, always. So blessing it all, I simply release this word, knowing as all prayers it is heard, it is answered, and so it is. Amen. My talk title this morning is Seat of the Soul. And so for the reading, I have chosen some excerpts from one of Oprah's Super Soul Sundays, where she interviewed a number of spiritual teachers and authors. And she asked the question, would you define what is soul? From Gary Zukav, the soul is that part of you that existed before you were born and that will exist after you die. It's the highest, most noble part of yourself you can reach for. From Iyanla Van Zandt, the soul, I believe, is the fingerprint of God that becomes a physical body. The fingerprint of God, unique to every body. From Daniel Pink, the soul is, I think, our capacity to see that our lives are about something more than simply the day-to-day, and that we're here for a purpose. It could be connected to religion or not, but that there is a purpose for your being here. From Debbie Ford, to me, the soul is a part of us that never dies. It's who we are at our core. It carries all the messages and lessons that we've learned in the past and will carry all the lessons and messages that we take into the future. And finally, from Devon Franklin, the soul is the spirit. It is the connecting line to God. I believe the soul is where the Holy Spirit resides. I believe that it is literally, when you pick up the phone and then you have your 4G network, soon to be 5G maybe, the soul is the 4G network right to heaven. And we hear now again from Anton and Laura.
Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti 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 Om. We are looking for a way to find our truth. We are looking for a way to find our truth. When the sky is in our souls, we find heaven in our roots. The mountain we must climb becomes our muse as we seek our truth. On the journey to perfection, do we see our inner light as the candle in the window in the darkness of the night, where every star's a candle in spirit's vast array, and the song within our hearts is there to help us on the way. We sing Om Shanti 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 Om. Om Shanti 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 Om. We sing Om Shanti 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 Om. Om Shanti 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 Om. Its whisper leads us home.
Oh my. Thank you so much, Laura and Anton. How beautiful. Oh, we are all indeed looking for that truth, and the whisper in our hearts, the song in our hearts does indeed lead the way. Perfect song for our theme this month of May is Listen to Your Heart. So it's a perfect song. And the talk, the message this morning is Seat of the Soul. And I think there's a relationship between those two. I think the heart, which is at the center of our chakra system, it's at the middle between the lower chakras, which connect us to the earth, and the upper chakras, including the crown chakra and the third eye, which connect us to the universe, to spiritual sight. I think the heart is the gateway to our soul. So I wanted to read one more quote from Marianne Williamson about the soul, and I think this will lead into what I was given to speak about this morning. I'm going to admit that the talk may sound a little disjointed, we'll see, because the talk I had planned and wrote just morphed. I went to bed early last night, not really happy with what I was going to say, and woke up 2 hours later with a download of something completely different. So here we go, hang on, here we go together. Marianne Williamson said this about soul. For me, it's the truth of who we are. The light, the love which is within us goes by different names, but the truth of us. Michelangelo said that when he got a statue, that he would go to the quarry and get a big piece of marble. And the way he imagined it, God had already created the statue. And it was his job to just get rid of the excess marble. So that's what we're like. Inside is the being that God has already created. Some call it the Christ, the Buddha mind, the Shekinah, the light, the soul. And our job is to get rid of the excess, useless fear, thought forms of the world that actually hide the light of the soul. So I just love that comparison. And just a couple details that I learned about Michelangelo. When he, for instance, made the incredibly beautiful statue of David, he went and picked out a piece of marble that had actually been rejected by 2 other sculptors as too difficult to work with. The veins in it were troublesome and so on. And created this magnificent statue, which I had the privilege of viewing at the Galleria in Florence. I was so excited to see it because just from the pictures I knew it was mind-blowing. And the statue, for those of you who may not have seen it, is 17 feet tall. It's 3 times the size of a person. And it was just so, so exquisite. The passion with which Michelangelo performed his work was nothing short of divine. He believed, as Marianne said, that God had placed the image in the marble, and all he had to do was chip away at it. He was so passionate about his work that he sometimes put candles in his hat at night so that he could work through the night. It took him 2 or 3 years to complete the statue of David. Now, the method that Michelangelo used is called the subtractive method of sculpture, which simply means that, as he said, he takes the piece of marble and removes the excess to reveal the image. So it's the hardest way for a sculptor to work, in that if you chip away too much, you're out of luck. You can't go back and put it back in there. But as he described it, he just saw it so clearly that he chipped away the marble until he got to the skin of David, or the skin of the Virgin Mother, the skin of the figure that he was revealing as God had led him to do. I have been led to make an analogy between this idea of subtractive sculpturing, of chipping away the excess, the stuff that doesn't belong to the beautiful, perfect image that the divine planted in each of us. That this process we're in right now, this COVID-19 pandemic, is calling us to chip away at what no longer serves us, to release those habits, beliefs, practices, ways of being together that are not our divine nature. It's calling us as a collective global community into retreat, into silence, into figuring out what we need to release. And I think this is happening for us both personally and collectively as a global society. To get back to our center, to get back to our soul, to get back to our values, to get back to acting and being the way the divine intended us to do. Now, there's another form of sculpture I learned, which is called the additive method. And this is when an artist builds up a figure, usually starting with a form underneath and adding, let's say it's clay, to form a figure around that original form, adding things to it. It's the same method that's used when some sculptures make a clay form, and then from the clay form create a form. I'm not sure if I have the right word, but a mold is the right word. Pouring liquid, let's say copper, into that mold and then making the form. Making a cast, if you will. And, thinking about this, or just being led to think about this, I think our first half of life, we often function as a sculpture using the additive method. We add things to ourselves, or at least we feel like we are. We add the ability to walk, the ability to talk. We add learning when we go to school. We learn the 3 R's. We add a livelihood for ourselves as young people in our late teens or early 20s. We eke out a living, sometimes a profession. We're learning and building a life, building good, financial good and security, and just learning to be in the world. And I don't know about you, but for me personally, while this part of life was invigorating because we are learning to do things and we're getting a better sense of ourselves, we're differentiating from our parents, for instance, as psychologists tell us each child needs to do. For me growing up, as many of us have, in an abusive family, I was really obsessed with this additive method because I felt like there was something missing, that there was something wrong with me, intrinsically missing. And so I compulsively was a student that wanted to get straight A's, trying to prove that I had value, trying to prove to myself that I was worthy, trying to prove it to my teachers, my parents. And so good came of that. I got to go to a great school for college, and I learned skills that sustained me and led to wonderful jobs later on. But it came at a cost. It came at a great cost to how I felt about myself, to my peace of mind, to my feelings of worthiness. And I think a lot of us, even if we're not as compulsive as I was and coming from that feeling of emptiness, a lot of us in the early part of our lives work hard to advance, to create perhaps a family, to create security, to create this and that and the other thing. And then towards the second half of life, as Richard Rohr wrote about in his book Falling Upward, there's a settling down and a settling into what really matters, and a letting go to some extent of the striving and the adding and trying to add something to us, and discovering instead who we are. Just as Michelangelo had to chip away the excess from that marble, we're called to chip away habits, practices, beliefs that really aren't the truth of who we are. Now, there's a third method of sculpture, which is actually a subset of the additive method, and it's called the assemblage method. And this is the method an artist takes when he or she takes objects and puts objects together to form a sculpture, to form something else out of all those other objects. We see that in modern art, but it's been in existence even in Michelangelo's time. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting concept too, because I think growing up, a lot of times we learn by imitation, right? We learn how to speak by imitating people around us, their speech. We learn to walk by watching others walk and knowing that that's even a possibility. And I think along the way, a lot of times, as we form our personalities and begin to get to know ourselves, we copy others. It was interesting, in ministerial school, we had a class called Finding Your Authentic Voice. And the minister who taught it spoke about, you can admire other ministers and you can maybe even learn things from how they do things. But if you're trying to copy someone else, it will never work. What you need to do is find your own authentic voice. Be authentically who you are. Emerson spoke to this when he said, imitation is suicide. Envy is nonsense. It is destructive. And so again, I think we're called to look at who are we? Where is our soul? And what matters to us? Envy is ignorance, is what Emerson said. Ignorance. In other words, we don't need to look at others and be jealous or think that they're better than, because we're each, as our founder Ernest Holmes said, we are each unique incarnations, expressions of that one life. Precious and unique. And we're each given a constellation of gifts that is different from anyone else's. And so not using that full voice authentically, that full constellation of gifts authentically, is a waste. It's really a tragic waste. And of course, as life would have it, we come against obstacles and difficult experiences that are out of our control, that mold who we are. And I think if we let them push us along that path of really uncovering who we are. There's a beautiful story in Gary Zukav's book called Soul Stories. These are all true stories of people discovering their soul, discovering where the seat of their true soul is. And I remember in particular a story about a young woman named Jennifer. Jennifer was a nursing student. She had gone through a painful divorce, was a single mom. And before her second year of nursing school, she went into the dean's office and was informed that she was missing a critical prerequisite that a student must have before entering year 2. There was a fear in the pit of her stomach as the dean told her this. Like, you're kidding. I've done everything I was told to do. He said, I'm sorry. This is just the way it is. I'm sorry this happened. And she said, well, can't I start year 2? This was the end of her first year, and take the course then. And he said, no, you really can't. It's only offered every other year. It won't be offered again until a year from now, next summer. And she went, oh my gosh, a whole year I have to waste? So she went into her advisor, leaving the dean's office, trying not to cry, and saying to the advisor, how could this happen? And he said, I am so, so very sorry. It's my bad. I forgot to tell you. But there's nothing that can be done. Rules are rules. So Jennifer dropped out of ministerial school, much to her chagrin, because she was trying to prove to her ex-husband that she could do this on her own, that she could become a nurse, that she could provide a livelihood for her daughter. She was working 2 jobs and going to school. Well, a month after she dropped out of school, her elderly father was in a very bad accident. Ribs were broken. He was in the hospital for weeks. He didn't know who she was when she'd visit. Sometimes he'd see people that weren't present around the bed. Sometimes he wouldn't see people that were. Eventually, he was transferred to a nursing home, which cost a lot of money, and eventually they ran out of money. And Jennifer was forced to sell his home, which was also the home of her and her daughter. She managed to buy another smaller home. She managed to imagine the upheaval in her life, trying to find a nursing home, take care of her father, sell a house, buy a house, and work 2 jobs and be a parent. But by the time he got out of the hospital, she was a nurse. She had returned to school, and she was a nurse. And I'd like to read a little paragraph about what Gary Zukav says about that experience. He writes, what had seemed unfair to Jennifer at the time, very unfair, being forced to leave school, now seemed like a blessing. Her advisor's mistake gave her the time she needed to take care of her father and transform her life in the process. If she had known this when she spoke with the dean, she wouldn't have been upset. She would have seen things very differently. Zukav asks, have you ever felt that something terrible was happening to you, but later looked back and realized that it was actually a good thing? I bet most of you have. I know I have. That happens to everyone. When you realize that everything that happens to you is for your good all the time, you are seeing your life the way your soul sees it. That is the vision of the soul. Gary Zukav calls it multisensory perception, perception that is larger and outside the perspective of the 5 senses. Seeing the blessing. And I think, again, this is what is happening with this coronavirus. In many ways, it's a very challenging, tragic time. We're seeing people lose their lives and livelihood. We're seeing a collapse of economies and businesses. And yet, if we look with the soul sight, we know that everything is working for our good, that this is bringing us closer to our values, calling us to chip away at what no longer serves us. I listened to a little message this week from spiritual teacher Carolyn Mace, who talked about the difference between fate and destiny. She said, fate is when we relinquish the power of choice. Fate is when we feel helpless, hopeless, like we're a victim to circumstances. And that's understandable why sometimes we feel that way. But destiny, she said, is when you write the end of your own story, as Jennifer did. She persisted and came out the other end better and stronger. Mace says, fate always leads us on a path we did not anticipate into a world where your soul takes charge. We're at a crossroads right now. We're at a crossroads not only individually to uncover what our souls want, but what is the collective soul asking us to create globally, in this country, as a nation, and across the globe. What is it our souls are calling us to create? And it's interesting in this time. You know, I heard on the news this week that when we come out of social isolation, because we will likely be in a recession, we could go either way on, I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but oh well. We could go either way, for instance, on what kind of care we're going to take of the earth. Because businesses will be tempted not to spend the extra money to do what we need to be environmentally responsible. But at the same time, because we have many people now working from home and businesses may continue that practice, that could easily help preserve the blue skies and the clear waters. But we will have to set an intention as a people about where we're headed and why. I spoke a week or so ago about the fact that the Chinese character for danger is the same character that means opportunity. Certainly this COVID-19 pandemic has provided us an opportunity, and it has nudged us into a subtractive process. What is it we need to let go of? I'm also thinking this week of the Buddhist practice of contemplating death. You know, in our culture in this Western world, we don't like to think about aging. We have all kinds of materials, hair dyes and skin creams and ways we want to stay youthful and think that we're vital and not really think about the fact that we're all going to age and we're all going to die. And the Buddhists think it's a very important practice every day to contemplate our mortality. They do a meditation that's called a cemetery meditation. And the Buddhists believe there are many benefits to this, not the least of which is getting our priorities straight. If we are aware that we're here in this earth school for a limited amount of time, then we're aware of how precious the time we have is. And we're more likely to live in accordance and congruence with our values. I think this is very true. And again, the COVID-19 virus has brought the specter, the possibility of death. We're all going to either be affected, have someone we love be affected, or have someone we know someone who is affected in a negative way by this virus. So what is it we need to chip away? What is it we need to release? I think it may be a little different for all of us, but I thought this week of 3 C's that I think we're all being called to release, to chip away. They are competition, consumption, and cruelty. Competition, wow, you know, we grow up in a school system that sets us up to compete with one another. We're in an economic system that sets us up to compete with one another. We have a society right now, an economic system where the difference between the haves and the have-nots, the very rich and the very poor, is growing. We have not managed to honor all of life. We just have not. And so the opposite of these 3 C's, the first being competition, I believe, it's compassion and it's cooperation. Let's take cooperation. If we really lived in a society where we cooperated, and you know, thank God because of the virus, we're seeing more cooperation, aren't we? We're seeing companies retool to provide PPEs, personal protective equipment. We've seen restaurants that have had to close to receive customers, open their doors and provide food for food banks. We've seen many, many ways. We've seen medical professionals who have retired and could live a life of ease and economic security go back into the fray and risk their lives to cooperate in an effort to save lives. A lot of cooperation. And I think cooperation comes about when we do recognize our oneness, our common divinity. I wanted to read to you a little poem, one of my favorites by the 17th mystic Tukaram. It's called First He Looked Confused. I could not lie anymore, so I started to call my dog God. First he looked confused. Then he started smiling. Then he even danced. I kept at it. Now he doesn't even bite. I'm wondering if this might not work on people. Imagine if we looked at everyone as a divine expression. If we looked at everyone as a unique incarnation of God. We would be drawn to reverence for all of life, to cooperating, to building a world that works for everyone. And I believe people respond when we do respect and revere the divinity within them. They change, just like the dog did, who no longer bites. So perhaps the very people that we're judging and criticizing, if we could look at them and know their divinity, there's an energetic that happens that transforms not only us, but the other person. So let's think about how we might chip away this idea that we have to compete and instead take in the ability to cooperate. The second C is consumption. And I'm reminded, I did a talk a few weeks ago about together in the chrysalis, that this experience we're in right now is like the caterpillar going into the chrysalis. And scientists tell us that before the worm, the caterpillar, goes into that chrysalis and builds it around itself, it overconsumes. It eats like crazy, taking in. And then when it goes into the chrysalis, it turns to goo. Its physical life as it was known is dismantled completely. And perhaps that's part of the reason we're in this COVID situation right now. We have overconsumed. We have taken in more than we needed. We have overconsumed and damaged the earth in the process. And so the opposite of consuming is conservation. How might we conserve? How might we limit not only our own need to consume, buy, bigger, better, faster, this and that, and allow there to be enough, because there is enough resource on the earth right now for everyone. What if we conserved the earth as well and really focused on how best to preserve her so that we all might live a prosperous life forever? Equalize the distribution of wealth. And the last C I think we're called to chip away is that of cruelty. We have seen so much cruelty leading up to this pandemic. So much strife and bitterness and acrimony and name-calling. And again, that comes when we're not looking at each other like Tukaram was looking at his dog, as divine beings, as worthy of reverence and love and respect. And just as I think competition can be turned to cooperation, consumption can be turned to conservation, I believe cruelty needs to be turned to compassion. St. Francis of Assisi said this. He said, "Can true humility and compassion exist in our words and eyes unless we too know we are capable of any act? There but for the grace of God go I." We are each capable of thinking murderous thoughts, for example. So if we can learn to let go of judgment and develop a compassionate heart, I think that would do a lot to reveal that statue of our soul that is meant to be who we are, that God meant us to be. And I think intentions are very important here. We know in science of mind that what we intend, what we affirm, we bring about. And so just as in our own lives, I think we can all think of periods when we intended something. I remember in my life, I was getting a divorce, which was one of those dark nights of the soul for me that ended up to be a good thing, that revealed more of who I was meant to be. But I remember intending over the summer when I finished a master in counseling degree, intending that I would find a job in the fall when my kids were going back to school, that I would find the perfect job. And, you know, when we release that and let the divine take over, it's amazing what happens. Because I had set a date at which I was intending to write my resume. And the week before that Friday, which was that date, I get a call from an elite private school in Phoenix that's looking for a counselor. It's an amazing job. It's on a scholastic calendar, so I'd have vacations off when my kids did. I have the interview. The headmaster had gone to a school that was very similar to the school I had gone to in Boston and was really taken with my experience and my resume. And I was hired, and I didn't have to go to work until January. It was just perfect. And, you know, I wrote the resume because I needed to get it to him that Friday, but the universe took over. You know, I love the quote many of you may be familiar with. It's a quote from Goethe, and it's been coupled with another little phrase from W.H. Murray, I think is his name. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy. The chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves in too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. And the other couplet that often is tacked on here is, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. Wow, begin it now. So what are we called to begin? What is it each of our own souls is called to release and then to intend? Who do I want to be when we are finally liberated from this sheltering at home, from this social distances? Who do I want to be, and what do I want the world to look like? What do we need to release? Listening to our hearts and finding that seat of the soul. There's so many beautiful examples of the power that can happen both personally and more universally when this happens. One of our books of the month this month is Stephen Cope's The Great Work of Your Life. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. So many stories in there of both extraordinary people, famous people, and ordinary people who follow that call of their soul. And Harriet Tubman's story is one of them. You know, this diminutive, tiny slave who had the call to escape herself. And when she first got the call from spirit within her, from her soul, that she was to liberate others, what did she say? No way. But it wouldn't let her go. And of course, you know the rest of the story. That through the course of 10 years, she liberated 300 slaves, including some of her family members, never losing a single soul. She walked by faith, not by sight. So there again, that's that multi-sensory perception that we each have access to. If we can learn to chip away what no longer serves us, to get to that essence of who we are, to reveal the beautiful statue that is our soul, the way God intended it, we can breathe more easily, we can be more fulfilled, we can lead a simpler life in harmony and happiness, and we can help create across the globe what works for all people and for the earth itself. The seat of our soul calls to each of us. So I'd like to go into a meditation now with the help of Anton and Laura. A meditation which will help us all to uncover that beautiful, beautiful image, that beautiful essence of who we came here to be. So I'm going to invite us to get comfortable wherever we may be at this moment, and to begin to take a couple deep, deep breaths. Breathing into the heart space. Imagining that we're allowing that heart space to expand. And as we breathe out, imagining that we're breathing out that compassionate love to everyone around us, that ripple that can go not only to those near us, but really ripple across the globe. Breathing in, allowing ourselves to be expanded, and breathing out. And imagining now that a sculptor has prepared a statue of you. And this statue represents not only your physical being, but this statue represents metaphorically the attributes of your soul, the call of your soul. And so I'm not sure what it looks like. It may be a combination of physical attributes that represent your body here on earth, the vehicle your soul has chosen to be in this earth school. But there are other parts of this statue, perhaps in that assemblage method of sculpture, symbols that represent your values, your meaning, your purpose. And so imagine now that this statue is draped, and you're invited into the room where the statue resides. And the covering on the statue is removed. And you're allowed to look at this statue that represents you. The original soul of you that God intended you to be, mindful of the fact that what has been chipped away is anything you've accumulated along life's journey that doesn't represent the essence of who you are. And so take a moment, if you would, in your mind's eye, to look at the statue, to walk the perimeter and just notice the statue. How big it is. Perhaps notice the physical essence of who you are, if that's been depicted by the sculptor. And just take a look. And I invite you to notice what other elements have been incorporated into this work of art that is you, that represents your heart's calling, your soul's calling. What symbols or metaphors can you see that are clues to what you need to be and do and embody during the rest of the time you have here on earth? Just take a moment to take in the symbols, the beauty, the soul's calling that is represented here. And perhaps qualities come to mind, spiritual qualities that best describe that soul essence and purpose of your life. So just allow them now to come to mind, blessing them, breathing them in, owning them, embracing them. invite you to notice that around the base of the statue lie other symbols, broken pieces of symbols that represent what it is you are needing or have needed to chip away from your life. What are those things you needed to release? And spend a moment examining them and noticing what was released and chipped away to reveal the beauty of your soul's essence and the clarity of your soul's purpose. Now, lifting your sight to the statue itself, taking in one last view of this beautiful work of art that the divine has wrought, that you have been willing to fulfill and embody and embrace. Blessing it, taking it into your heart. Giving thanks. And taking a moment to say goodbye, to bid farewell to this work of art for now. And in your mind's eye, as you leave the room, just have a sense that you carry that beautiful statue, which is the seat of your soul, with you. And as you begin to bring your attention back to the room where you are right now, I invite you to think about perhaps using a journal when we say goodbye. To think about what it is you're releasing, what it is you're embracing, what is it you're chipping away, and what is it you're revealing. To set some affirmations about I release, perhaps it's I release competition, I release cruelty, I release consumption, I embrace courage, compassion, conservation, cooperation, and then set an intention for who you want to be, the person you want to be when we end this period of isolation, and to set an intention for the world you want to create, the destiny you choose and we can choose collectively. And I'm going to invite us now to go into prayer. Once again, I declare, I recognize one presence, one power, one life, living itself as each emanation of spirit, each precious incarnation, expression of that one life. Holding reverence not only for the source itself, that power that has always got our back, that is always guiding, guarding, uplifting, that voice of our heart, always speaking to us if we care to listen, but having reverence as well for all the godlings, all our spiritual siblings, both in our families, in our towns, in our communities, in this nation, and across the globe. Knowing each one could be represented by a beautiful statue, a beautiful representation of what God intended when it gave each of us this constellation of gifts and values, that deep call of our soul, that when each of us follows that, expresses that, oh my, the destiny of the world changes. It is morphed. We move out of hopelessness, victimhood. We move out of competition, cruelty, and we move into a world beyond our fondest hopes. The world that was meant to be. The world that we can create. We have that power. It is not a personal power, an egoic power. It is the power of the divine within. It is the power of our soul. And so let us bless and give thanks right now for the so many souls across the planet right now who has followed that calling. Nurses like Jennifer who are putting their lives on the line, doctors, delivery people, grocery store workers, essential workers, and also blessing the moms and the dads who are home with their children doing the best they can to create an atmosphere of peace. Let us understand that those that we wish to judge or criticize are walking their path the best they can, that it is only hurting people who hurt others. And so if we can reverence and see the divinity, just like Tukaram did with his dog, if we can call everything God, we are able to help it transform. We are able to help it become the beautiful statue, minus all of the things we've tried to add value, because the fact is each of us is precious and of value because we were created by the divine intelligence, that perfect love. And so may we each walk this path, whatever time remains for us on this earth, in love, in reverence, in compassion, in cooperation, in conservation, in simplicity. For it is simple, my friends. It is simple, not easy, but simple. To see with a multi-sensory perception, to see with the eyes of God, to listen with our hearts. I bless each one of us. I bless this time, knowing that as difficult as it is, only good can come from it. We will see this as a blessing, for that's all it can be. God is everywhere present. And so giving thanks for this moment now, for these times now, for the call each one of us has in our soul, I release this word, knowing as all prayers, it is heard by the very heart of God, and it is answered now in the heart of God. And we say together, and so it is. Amen. Anton and Laura. As we close, my friends, I want to thank so many of you who have continued to be so generous as we continue our ministry. We're so grateful for the many gifts that have come in online by checks. We've gotten many love notes when people send checks. It has been so, so beautiful. And so at this time, I would like to say our affirmation that normally we say when we're in service together personally, which is a reminder of the beautiful spiritual practice of giving. And it goes like this: divine love as me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I give. And as the Bible tells us, give and it shall be given to you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. And so it is. On the screen, you'll see various ways to give if you're able and so called. A couple little announcements we have for our youth story time at noon today and 1 o'clock today. Zoom calls. Check our Facebook page for the codes or our newsletter. You can sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, which comes out every Wednesday. You can sign up on our Facebook page where it says email sign up. And so I'm going to turn things over once again to Anton and Laura for our closing song, and then a final blessing. Thank you all so much. We are indeed the light. So shine on, my friends, shine on. I love the idea that our souls are the fingerprint of God, unique to each of us. So let us listen to our soul's calling. As the amazing and wonderful Jean Houston says, our soul calls us with the lure of becoming. And while I'm on that subject, Jean Houston has agreed to be our honored guest speaker for this service on the 24th of May, so you'll want to be sure to tune in. In the meantime, bless you, shine on. We are becoming what God intended us to be. Take care. Bless you. I love you.